some of these guys up in that top 10 to 15 area.
Yeah, absolutely. You could think of your Joe Tryons, your Gregory, your Gregory Russos, guys that have tremendous ability, but they still need to develop. So we're going to look at each of our respective top 10 lists. I think one of the most fascinating things about when looking at people's lists for edge rushers is it's all over the place. You're definitely seeing that a lot of people have varying opinions. I mean, I've seen people that don't even have Gregory Rousseau in their top 10 to 15 edge players. So definitely, I have some guys that I've certainly ranked a lot higher than a lot of other people would, but I'll talk about it. But Austin, we're going to look at your top 10 first. And, you have Azeez Ojulari, number 1. You have Gregory Rousseau, 2. You have Kwity Paye, 3. You have Jalen Phillips, number 4. Jason Owe, 5. Carlos Basham, 6. Joseph Osai, 7. Joe Tryon, 8. Ronnie Perkins, 9. And, Peyton Turner, 10. So, maybe what we can do is, we'll go from 1 to 10 and then, just maybe take, 30 seconds on each of these guys and then talk a little bit about, why you have them ranked there.
Absolutely. We start with Ojulari over at Georgia. And the reason he's the top in this class is just because of the scheme versatility. I think there's going to be a lot of teams that have a role in mind for him, and they may be different. I personally think that him playing a strong side linebacker position in a hybrid scheme where he's the over linebacker that's walked down to the line of scrimmage, not exactly an edge position, but someone that can get involved as an edge player coming off the edge against the pass, but, is more of a take-on player against the run, which I think Ojulari is one of the best take-on players in this class. Yes, he does have the athleticism that makes you think he could be an outstanding edge rusher on passing downs as well as the arm length. My problem is I just don't know, at that 245 to 250-pound range, if playing him consistently on the edge and him consistently taking on tackles is going to be best for his future. Could he bulk up? Sure. I don't want to mess with his athleticism. So, I personally, could you play him as a 3-4 outside linebacker? Absolutely, you could, especially if you put him on the weak side where he's more of a pursuit player and that athleticism could shine. Put him on the strong side where he's constantly taking on a tackle or a double team with the tight end. I have my doubts about that, but in that hybrid scheme where he's not exactly an edge type player, where he's more flexed out 1x1 or 2x2 off the end man, I think that could be a much better role for him. And yes, he can put his hand on the ground in nickel situations and rush the passer. Russo, is my number 2. And I know you're not necessarily as big a fan of Russo as I am, but it's all about projecting.
Oh no,
the upside.
That's changed.
Yeah, well, it's all about projecting the upside with Russo, as it is with many of these guys. The thing about Russo, I will say, is that the tape, you see flashes of a really good athlete for someone who's over 6'6.5" obviously the long arms are there. He sometimes puts it together, although it does comes from the interior a lot where he actually uses that arm length. But the thing that really impressed me about his workout that's not getting a lot of talk from everybody else, because they said he had only a lukewarm workout, and in a lot of ways he did, but the 10-yard split of a 1.57 that is better than Phillips, it's better than Owa, it's better than Paye. That shows that this is a guy that can explode off the line quicker. And there are flashes of that in his 2019 tape. Now, I can easily see why some people would rank him much lower. I've heard one evaluator say, Austin, yes, he had a lot of sack potential or sack production that 2021 or 2019 season, I beg your pardon. But in the same sense, how many of those sacks came from the interior? Is he going to play on the interior in the NFL a ton, rush the passer a ton in the NFL from the interior? I don't see that. Some of it was as a true nose over the center's face, and stuff like that. It's like, guys, he's not going to play that in the NFL. So, I see the flexibility on how to rank Russo, but at the end of the day, I look at the size, I look at that really impressive 10-yard split in his 40, and I say, yes, a guy with that arm length, with that size, that can fire off the football with that kind of explosion, that makes me think of a guy that can really have edge rush success in the NFL. Once again, yes, we're projecting that because we didn't see it but for 1 year at Miami. But, it's there. Kwity Paye, another guy, limited tape. He looked impressive against Indiana this year, and then he gets nicked up, and we don't see him anymore. But the athleticism is there. We knew he was going to put on a show at his pro day. You could see it right there on tape that the athleticism is there, but we've got to refine it. We've got to polish it. This is a guy I wouldn't be shocked if some teams want to stand him up as an outside linebacker, in the 3-4 and play him at that. I really think he could be good in that role as a stand-up outside linebacker. If you want to put him on the ground, as a true edge defensive end, I think he can do that too. He reminds me quite a bit of Brandon Ingram when you talk about, a guy that's got a nice solid build, but yet somebody that's not exactly prototypical height, only around 6'2" or so. So, I do think he can survive standing up or playing, though, and that's why I've got him third. Phillips is one of my softer grades in this class as the fourth guy on my list, and that's simply because of the injury history, man. The injury history just scares the crap out of me. This is a guy that left UCLA with the intent of not playing football anymore after a third concussion. Guys, what's the decision he's going to make when the fourth concussion comes? Because every time you have one, you're that much more susceptible to one more whack to the head, and it happens again. So, with Phillips, that scares me. He went to Miami to study music and ended up, going out, and playing for Miami and having an impressive 2020 season. But I don't know. There's a lot of questions, and I don't want to say they're questions about his commitment to football. I believe he really does want to play football, but your health concerns, that's just a whole nother animal. And when you've got concerns in that area, when he's concerned about that area, he's walked away from the sport once. I have to say, if you're an NFL team evaluating him, that's a major, major risk, because one shot to the head and in his career, I mean, he could call it quits, or better yet, a doctor could tell him, "Hey, bud, you got to stop this." And then, rounding out my top five, and I'll let you weigh in after this. Jason Owa out of Penn State. I hear people ask me all the time, Austin, do you really think a guy could be drafted in the first round that didn't record a single sack in 2020? And I say, guys, the pressure was there. He does need to get better to finish. He does need to get better with his handwork to be able to get free so he can finish. But my goodness, you look at the tremendous athlete he is. I told one person, he reminds me of what Montez Sweat was a year before Montez Sweat came out. Montez Sweat could have come out a year early. He stayed at Mississippi State, ended up having a really good final year there, went to the Senior Bowl, impressed us even more, and came to the Washington as a more ready player than what he could have been a year prior. I think Jason O was kind of in that boat where he did decide to come out as opposed to staying for the one more year and growing that much more and finally turning potential into production. But I tell you, for defensive coordinators that believe that they've got the magic touch that can coach up and they can refine somebody who's just got extremely elite athletic ability, and it shows up on tape. This isn't a guy where we were shocked that he went out and tested well. It shows up on the tape. It just, you got to figure out a way how to finish. They've got to groom him. They've got to coach him. They've got to be a little bit patient with him. I wouldn't be shocked if somebody just drafted him with a specialty pass rusher, in mind, somebody that doesn't play a ton in the base and rotates in the nickel, at least in his first year. I wouldn't be shocked about that at all. But in the end, if you're patient, boy, the reward could be immensely, significant for a franchise if they can just groom him and be patient with him. Steve, yeah,
No,
there you
yeah,
go.
no, I was on mute for a second. Interesting. I don't really, Owe, I look at someone you have to be patient with, but I also don't really look at him as a big risk either. I honestly, I think Russo is a little bit more risky in some ways, but yeah, I think, because you don't know exactly, are you going to put him over the middle? But I don't really think of him as Ed Oliver per se, even though Ed Oliver's not really, developed into what he could be yet. But also, people wonder is every natural position for him. I have Russo ranked very high. I'll talk about that in a bit. But I think you have Ojulari number 1, you have Russo 2, you have Pay 3, Phillips 4, Owe 5. But I think Owe, I was saying, you can definitely, like you said, you have to be patient with him. But I think he's showing you a lot that he can actually turn into something. Interesting that you have Ojulari ranked that high. Now, do you have him ranked that high because you think that at this point in time, in terms of not having an injury history and showing you that he's done well against quality competition? We can go back to the Alabama game. He had a good game against Leatherwood, who was his assignment that game. Is that why you have Ojulari number 1?
I tell you, I have Ojulari ranked that high because of that linebacker position I talked about. And I think he could play Sam in a 4-3. I think he could play, like I say, on the weak side in a 3-4, where his size and having to take on a tackle or a double team quite as much won't be quite, it won't be as often. It won't be as much in the trenches and constantly, getting that 245, 250 pound frame beat up. But I'll say this too. There's something that Ojulari shows that a lot of these guys, I can't necessarily say it for because there's just limited tape. And they haven't proven it on a consistent basis. God, Ojulari's motor never stops. And this is a guy that you see his desire to succeed. And that in itself, boosts him above a number of guys on this list simply because whatever task you throw his way, hey, bud, we want you to play Sam linebacker. We want you to play a hybrid position. We want you to play an outside linebacker in a 3-4 or a defensive end in the nickel, whatever it may be. You are going to get his best, his best effort, and he's got the skill sets to succeed in a lot of different ways. That's why I've got him up higher. There's going to be some teams that don't have Russo or Phillips or maybe even Owa that high on their board simply because of the question marks.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing we talk about, a lot of variances in terms of how you grade, how I'll grade, how other, scouts in the media will grade, is that I think we're also grading a lot on different criteria. I think, my top 10, my top 15, actually, a lot of it's really based on just how I see them, translating, as an edge, where some people, like, for example, when I go into, I don't have Kwity Paye ranked in my top 3. But that doesn't mean he's not one of the top 3 best football players that's on that list. But I think when we look at edge assignments, there's different thought processes there. And yours with Ojulari is that he can do a lot of different things. And in an NFL today that values versatility, that's important. So again, for those that are listening to podcast form that can't see all this, Austin has Azeez Ojulari number 1. Gregory Russo, number 2, Kwity Paye, number 3, Jalen Phillips, number 4, Jason Owe, number 5. He has Carlos Basham Jr. at number 6. He has Joseph Osai at number 7. At 8, he has Joe Tryon. At 9, he has Ronnie Perkins. At 10, he has Peyton Turner. And although we won't have time to go through, film go through